Alrighty. Welcome back into the Fourth Man podcast. I'm your host, Anthony, as always, and thanks again for tuning in to another edition. It's the championship week edition, and because it's the final week of the 2024 Big 3 season, I felt like we needed to bring in someone today who's been very close to the action all summer long. She's the host of the Courtside Club podcast, former host of 2K TV, and the current Courtside Commentator for the Big 3, Rachel DeMita. Thanks again for your time and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I don't think I've ever said Courtside that many times in a row, but it sounds like that is kind of the definitions of your role here recently. But I want to ask,
It's mine. I own Courtside, you know.
got to get that trademark somewhere in there, but you're kind of wrapping up your first year being a part of the Big 3. So I want to start here. Where's your head at kind of as we enter the final week of the Big 3 season with the All-Star game and then ultimately the championship?
It's honestly kind of crazy because it flew by. Like I can't believe this is our last week. It's been so much fun, and I feel like in the beginning it felt like it was going to be, I don't know. I just feel like Oakland was just last week. I don't know. It's crazy that we're in that championship week, but it's been cool for me because obviously this is my first season with the Big 3, and I've been familiar with the Big 3 in seasons past, but I haven't been like this close to the action, this invested in obviously the teams and the players and whatnot. And it was so easy to get invested in the teams. And I didn't think like even that last game where it was Three's Company versus the Enemies, it's like I didn't know I would ever be so invested in like I was on the edge of my seat, just like all the fans were. Like Scal and I were standing up and, ready for that. And it's sad to me because I feel like I had three favorite teams this season, and it was Bivouac, Enemies, and Three's Company. And so I kind of wanted like all of them to be in the championship game. And I'm a little bit bummed that we're not getting the Enemies Bivouac rematch because that game was so crazy during the season. But again, I feel like Three's Company and Bivouac is probably the most evenly matched teams that we have in the league. And just their size and having, Brewer on one side, Beasley on the other. I don't know. It's going to be a crazy championship game, and I'm excited for it. I rambled quite a bit. I don't know if that answered your question.
No,
but yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it.
It's a very broad question, so you certainly answered it in all facets there. So no worries. And I definitely want to talk about the matchups last week, as well as the history of this game dating back to just recently as week 2. But I do want to start just because I'm fanboying a little bit here, mostly because it's kind of full circle for me personally, just because I've had hobbies around obviously enjoying the Big 3 and podcasting and talking about it. But even before so, knowing your name because I was a big 2K player back in the day and just kind of seeing you as a 2K TV host, It's pretty full circle and pretty wild that, you're a part of the Big 3 now. I want to ask, though, kind of about your career just a little bit and then talk about the Big 3. And pretty broad questions here as well, but you're a former D1 college athlete, and now you're pretty big into the sports journalism roles here with your different, like you mentioned, different areas of being a courtside commentator. But did you always know that you wanted to be in sports journalism? Because I've seen where some athletes more so want to do something a little bit different and then more so are invested into what their sport was previously.
Yeah, I would say no. I went to college for broadcast journalism and performing arts, but I actually wanted to focus in the entertainment space. So I really didn't even after I quit basketball, it was kind of, it was like a breakup in a sense. So I kind of needed a break away from basketball because I was kind of too emotional around it. And so I did some reporting in college. And when basketball season came around, it was like too emotional for me to even be out there reporting on basketball. So I actually focused on other sports. And in the same time, I had an internship with Entertainment Tonight during the summer before my senior year of college. And from that, I was in LA and I was reporting on things like beauty and fashion and entertainment, which is so funny to say now because I've so completely gone the opposite direction. But I honestly, I really loved that. And I loved that side of journalism and of hosting. And I think over the years, like that's kind of where I started. I started in the beauty and fashion space, and I started on YouTube even covering those sort of things and doing like outfits of the day and here's my makeup routine and some of the stuff that, you see on TikTok now. And then I slowly, like a few years later, fell back, I feel like accidentally in the basketball space and started working with brands like Nike and Adidas. And then from that, Ball is Life, even who, covers a lot of the big three stuff. Was doing some stuff with them, was interviewing high school athletes. And then from that, 2K kind of saw my work that I was doing on my personal YouTube channel. And they, were like, hey, we're looking for a host for this new show that we're doing, this like brand new concept, never been done before. And so I had some interviews with them. And then my audition was to actually interview and almost like field produce interviews with Shaq and Ernie Johnson. That was kind of my first,
wow.
like, let's see if she can do this, which is like kind of crazy, and I think I was like, that's maybe like 10 years ago at the time. So I'm in my early 20s, like, a bit nervous about it, but
Sure.
I did well. And they were like, hey, we want to have you on. So I was there for 5 seasons. It was amazing. And so I feel like to answer your question, no, I didn't know I would fall back into sports, but basketball is something that obviously has just been a part of my DNA since I was a kid. And it's something that I know like the back of my hand. I can talk about it in any regard. But I think with my show Courtside Club and even with the big three, like the things that I'm most interested in about sports is kind of those supplementary stories that like run alongside like the entertainment side of sports. And I feel like that's also something that the big three is like, it's such a cultural league in a sense. Like it isn't so stuffy. It isn't all about basketball. Like we have
Right.
some crazy personalities. Like it's fun. And even the big three kind of allows me to post in the way that I would on other platforms as well. It's not so stuffy that I feel like I have to be like strictly in this sideline reporter role, which is kind of not what I've ever been. And so I feel like I've found a way to merge the entertainment side and then the sports side, which I love, into almost everything I do in my career. So
Yeah. And definitely sounds like, I mean, in a way, you've kind of meshed your two interests of entertainment and then basketball into all in one. And I feel like the big three is kind of the culminating like end result there, where you just kind of get to do a little
for
bit of
sure.
everything. So that's super cool. And
Hmm.
I always talk to a lot of my friends and even people that are interested in basketball and let them know like, hey, it's not just basketball games you'd be attending to. I mean, we just saw 3-6 Mafia pull up to Nashville randomly. So you get a little bit of
Yeah,
a concert and then the entertainment factor as well. So that's really cool.
for sure.
And
Don't we have some cool people performing in Boston too? Do you know who's performing?
I don't know who's performing, although I did see the celebrity all-star guest list, and there's some artists on there too. So
Okay, cool.
I think there's going to be some cool people along with some, different athletes from different places. But I feel like first of all, it's like you'll never have a bad backup plan with Ice Cube being the co-founder. So that's always a,
Yeah.
a cool mix in there. But I think he's always, just because of his pedigree and what he's, done for the culture, can always bring in someone cool. So I'm certainly looking forward to
Yeah.
Boston. Definitely.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm sure with our championship game and stuff, I'm sure it'll be someone great, if not multiple,
yeah.
but we'll see.
And we'll see if maybe, I mean, I know Jaylen Brown pulled up last year. There were some rumors that I heard that
Yeah.
maybe someone else is supposed to pull up, a current NBA player. So we'll see if they can
Oh, cool.
bring up anybody, this year, if, being kind of in
Yeah,
Jalen's home space there.
definitely.
Yeah. And
Let's see.
I'm sure too, just, dating back to your kind of your early roles in 2K TV and your early 20s to now being kind of a vet and experience within this. I'm sure along the way there was a few learning curves just from even coming out as a college athlete to 2K TV to now kind of what you're doing today in multiple different roles. Has there been like one certain like piece of advice or like big learning curve that you've taken with you throughout your kind of your journey?
Um, well, I think it's just different. It's different for us now in media because of how quick like the landscape of media changes. And I think that has been the most challenging part of my career. It used to be honestly like even like 15 years ago, if you were on television, you were just an anchor, you were just a sideline reporter, or you were just, in the field doing this, or you were just a camera person. At this point, you have to be able to do everything. And so I'm glad I learned how to edit in college. I'm glad I know how to work a camera, because a lot of times, even for Courtside Club, like I'm setting up my own cameras. I do the first edits on all of my episodes, and then my editor comes in later and like, makes them better and like adds the bells and whistles to them. And then also having social media along with that, like that is something that is so great for, I feel like, people trying to get into this space, because you just have your own platform. You can create, you don't need like an entity to be a part of to create content. So it's great in that sense, but it also just like adds more work for you, because if you're doing it right, you should have a presence on social media. And then you should also, it's like I split the line between being able to do traditional television and then also keeping up with my social media and the content there, which is a lot, because a lot of times, even when I'm at the Big 3 and I'm, doing interviews and jumping on the broadcast, like my brain is just in like reporter hosting mode. Although it would be great to have some content for my social media, but then I have to like jump out of this mode that I'm in to like create content. And then again, I need to be focused on the games and watching what's going on to make sure that when I am going into that interview, I have the right question to ask. And so I feel like that's been the most challenging part, is just like trying to do both. But for me, my income comes from both.
Right.
I do brand deals where I'm, getting sent here and there, traveling this for a lot of money just to post a photo on Instagram. And so it's like I have to keep up with that, because why would I pass on those sorts of things that are really fun? But I feel like I have two different brains that I jump in and out of. And so finding time for both, being able to create for both is a blessing, but also it's just like it's a lot. It's a lot sometimes.
I'm sure. I mean, even just as a hobby, I can't even relate, just because I feel like it's already a lot of work in itself. Doing some of the things you mentioned, setting up your own show, editing, which I'm sure most people have heard that's never the fun part, and
Yeah.
and then posting, obviously, to different platforms. And then a couple of things I heard you say were just like adaptation being one of the things, being able to be in kind of different modes and different thought processes in order to do the right thing, but also within that same vein, like being able to do it right. Like that's, I feel like the biggest thing is that there's a lot of people that can do it, and then there's people that do it on a bigger stage that do it really well. And so that's where I give a lot of kudos to people that are doing it really well, because it does feel like you guys are doing it for multiple different entities and probably doing a lot of different takes in the meantime as well.
Yeah. And I feel like hosting too, it might just look like it's just us being able to talk in front of a camera, but it really does take a lot of hours. And I feel like the only way that you get better in the hosting space is just by doing it. You just have to get reps in.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if you look back to some of my first episodes of 2K TV, like, yeah, they're cute. Yeah, but I wasn't very good, and I progressively got better over the seasons. And I'm better now than I was then. And I'm sure in 5 years, I'll be better then than I am now. And it's really the only way to do it is to do it. You just have to get experience and get reps in. There's no way to like read a book to tell you how to host or conduct a good interview,
Yeah, no,
So,
definitely. Because they're also different too. It's like some of them are conversations. Some of them do feel like you're playing 20 questions. And maybe that, I feel like there's no wrong way to do it necessarily. It's more of just about how everything ends up flowing. So, yeah, I'm sure.
I think you also need to like be yourself. That's one
Sure.
thing I don't like. There's certain people on television, I feel like it's more maybe the old school people.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems so fake and phony. Like you hear that phony laugh that they do when it's like their guests will say something that's not that funny and they act like it's the funniest thing they've heard in the world. And so there's like things like that. I think that I've been successful because I've just stayed true to my style.
Sure.
And I give credit to the Big 3 for allowing me to continue to do that. They're not trying to turn me into somebody that I'm not. And I feel like I'm really selective about the jobs that I do take, because I don't just want to be stuck in a role where I'm reading a teleprompter of a script that I didn't write and having to talk about topics that I don't really care about. And so that's why I love Courtside Club and that aspect, is because all of those topics that you do hear me talk about, like I'm gonna be real and honest and share my genuine opinions about things and just talk like I would normally talk, like maybe in just in like a little bit more polished way than I speak to my friends.
Sure.
But it's authentic. And I think authenticity, and that's why like even a show like Inside the NBA does so well, is because those guys are just being them, you know? And it's like I think that people I think if you're getting into the space, you need to first like find yourself and be you, because you trying to fake being somebody else is only going to last for so long. Like that's impossible to do in the long run. So like find yourself, be you, and then like polish yourself to make sure that you present yourself well on camera. I think that's the formula.
Yeah, I think that's like really good advice because you said old school, but even new school. I mean, if you look at some of the people that try to perfect the formula, let's say behind YouTube, and make sure that they have their thumbnails correct and have this, great opener or whatever the case may be. As much as that stuff gets traction, I've never been a fan of videos like that, mainly because it does feel so phony. And so I think that's great advice too. And I think the motto of it's not about your name, it's about your game is not only relevant to people trying to play in the big three, but just kind of in life itself. It's like you can be super authentic, but as long as you're performing and doing well and people are finding a lot of interest in it, I think that goes a long way. So I love that advice.
For sure.
And a lot of what you've done is obviously taken you to this point with you being in the big three, being in a little bit of a new role as a courtside commentator. I got to ask, I know you said you've been following the league for a little bit, but how did this opportunity come about? And what was kind of the selling point and being like, okay, I'm in?
Well, it's funny because they just DM'd me on Instagram, which is crazy.
Oh, wow. See, that's the new world.
And it wasn't like, hey, here's the job. It was like, hey, we'd like to talk to you, about an opportunity, whatever. So then I got on the phone with Sean and kind of, chatted about it. And then he asked me about my experiences and that. And then I sent over, examples of my work, things that I've done. And then it was just kind of getting the approval of Jeff and Cube. And all this took place like over a few months. And obviously, talking to my agents, this and that. I thought it was cool, one, because it was the first time that I felt like a role was being created that just fit perfectly for me, because it was traditional TV sideline reporting, which, yes, I can do. I don't do much of it, but yes, that's cool. Down to do it, especially for a league like this. That's fun. But then on the flip side, this was the first season that our games were being live broadcast on X, right? So in that sense, they wanted me to even take more of a lead there, because most of the things that I've done have been like live streamed on Twitch or YouTube or in a video. It's like always like not traditional television, like CBS. And so that just sounded fun for me, like being able to take point in that. And then at the same time, like think of creative ideas for social content and collaborating on my show Courtside Club. Like I've had Nancy and Scal on Courtside Club this year, which have been really fun. And so I feel like just in general, I feel like off the rip, they kind of understood me and like got it about kind of my strengths. And so it just felt like a position where I could really thrive. And then I don't know, the big three is just cool. I was like, this will be fun.
Yeah, that's
traveling to a new city every summer. Like,
fair. The big three is an answer I would have accepted too.
Yeah, it's just like it's cool. So like I'm down. Yeah, let's do this. And so it has been really fun. For sure.
Speaking of just content to grab for yourself, what about the Wave in Nashville? I don't think I've ever seen the Wave perform at a Big Three game. Like, kudos to who started that. I think it's the
Wait, who was that? Who was the guy?
I think
who was that guy who started it? He has like the hair.
Yeah, I don't know his first name because I've never met him personally, but every time I'm at an event, I see him. And he's always got a sign that says, like, I see greatness in you, or we see greatness in you. But he just feels like a jovial, I don't know, a lively person. And I'm pretty sure he's the one that started it, because I saw him from a distance and I was like,
he definitely started it. I was watching him. So he went off into the crowd, and then the first one like didn't really work. And he's like, okay, let's do it again. And then it kept going like around. It was so good.
I thought it was just going to be like that side of the arena.
Oh no.
And then it just trickled around to the whole arena, and I was like, wow. Well, I can't
Oh
imagine
yeah,
being
you
like
had
in game.
security doing it. You had
Yeah.
everybody joining in. It was fun.
That was so cool.
Yeah, I loved that.
You also mentioned Nancy Lieberman being on your show, and maybe I'm not too familiar with Old Dominion hoops, but I don't feel like there's a ton of just. I mean, I'm from a mid-major school myself, so I understand that there's not like a ton of like big-time athletes from mid-major schools all the time. But you being from Old Dominion, her being a legend from Old Dominion, um, is that someone you've had a relationship with for a little while? And if so, do you feel like your relationship has progressed and grown now that you guys are working together on the same team?
So I always knew about Nancy, and she was one of the reasons that I went to ODU. And when I was being recruited there, we were ranked like 11th in the country. Coach Wendy Larry was still there. So they really were a powerhouse. And my coach was, friends with Pat Summit and Gino and all the things. So I don't think the program is in the same place that it was like back in the early 2000s. I had never met Nancy though. So I thought it was so cool to be working with her. And she was just so warm from the jump. And I think that was like an overall trend that I saw with everyone at the Big 3 that you don't always get is people were just like very warm and welcoming to me joining the team. And so coming from her was just like, I don't know, really cool. And she was the first one who was a guest on Courtside Club. And she even told me there, she's like, you are going to love it. This is going to be the best summer of your life. Like, I promise you. Like, she's just like all in on the Big 3. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, we'll see. Oh, she was so right. It's been really fun. So,
That's so cool. She's
but
not
yeah,
only
Nancy's a legend. I feel like she would put on her shoes and go hoop if she had the opportunity. Like, if a team was like, hey, Nancy, you want to come play today? She'd be like, yeah, let's go.
she might even do it for her own team. I know that we've
Yeah,
seen
she's
Charles Oakley back in 2017 kind of uh, get his feet wet again, only to I think he picked up like
yeah.
3 fouls in like a minute. I
Oh,
think that was the
geez.
end of it. And
That's
there's
what he needed.
yeah,
That's what his team needed at the time. They needed an enforcer on the
I
court.
guess so. He like knocked out Al Harrington for a good minute, so I guess that old man
Oh,
strength
that's
really did
funny.
come into play still. But it would be cool to see like Nancy and maybe her son TJ like playing alongside each other as a I don't know like a
Oh,
celebrity game at
Nancy's
one
for
point.
sure still a hooper. I don't know if she would get out there, but I think her heart wants to. I think if she had that opportunity, she would. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt.
Nancy's great.
Okay, so now you've had 10 weeks to familiarize yourself with the Big 3 going into the championship game here. I want to talk a little bit about just last week because there were two really good matchups. Obviously, the main one being Three's Company and Enemies. But what did you make from the games? Like ultimately, what were your biggest takeaways to maybe sway you? Like, oh, Big Black is the one that's going to run the table, or Three's Company, there's no way they don't win it all this year. Was there anything that like stood out to you, and what did you just kind of make of the games and the atmosphere in Nashville?
Well, I think from like going back to the beginning of the season, the reason why I've always liked Bivouac is because they can shoot well from the outside. Like aside from Lisa Leslie's team triplets, who obviously like Jeremy was shooting insane all season. But aside from that team, like they were one team who shot well from the outside, but then also could go in. And it just seems to like widen the floor for them.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And give them a lot more space. And so I've always been like, this team I felt like is really good. Right. And then Three's Company is funny because they're just such a gritty team. And I feel like Reggie Evans is out there to intimidate whoever they're playing because if you watch any Three's Company game, like within the first 4 minutes of every game, he's getting into it with somebody. And I think that that's just his persona. I think it's just what he does. I think it's part of his ammo. It's part of his game is to get into people's heads. And so I think having him in the inside and then obviously having Beasley, who is impossible to guard because the man can make a shot at any point on the court at any time. Which, by the way, I know we've all seen that footage of him like making the game winning shot and then just running off the court. We could not find him after the game. Like he was just out of there. And I was even on the court to do a post-game interview with him, and we were already running over time on CBS. And if you guys know anything about like TV broadcasts, you only have a certain amount of time, then you kind of have to get off air because they have, something else in the programming coming up. So we didn't have that much time. So I'm like running on the court in my heels trying to find Beasley, and he's just out. I'm telling my producer, I said, he's gone, I think that's it. But obviously, like, Three's Company having scores like him, like Chalmers, like what's his name? I'm blanking.
Are you thinking of Nas Core?
Yes, Nasir Core, who's been playing outstanding all season. I mean, they have scores on their team. I think Bivouac, and also it's so nice where we're sitting on the court because I can always hear what's going on in the huddle. So I'm always just like snooping and trying to hear what the coaches are telling their guys. But it seems like for Bivouac, their whole thing this entire season has been focusing on defense. And, the tale is old time saying, as defense wins championships, it seems to be working out for them. So Bivouac to me seems very well-rounded, well-coached. Obviously, they've turned around this franchise this season, which is really cool. It's gonna be a great matchup in this championship game. I'm sad because I loved the enemy's team. And I don't know if I loved the enemy's team because it was also like the first team that I interviewed this season. Like I felt like welcomed in by them.
Sure.
And Jordan Crawford actually gave me an enemy's t-shirt and stuff. So I have like some of their, so they've been like super welcoming. I think they're a super fun team, and just how gritty they were all season with they didn't have much size at all. Them going up against Bivouac or Three's Company, like the matchups were tough. But the thing about them is they were going to hustle. They were going to get the loose balls. They were going to fight until the end in every single game. And so a part of me is bummed that they're not in the championship, but I think the two best teams are there. So
yeah. It's pretty, that kind of final sequence of the enemy's Three's Company game where they're tied at 47, and you really if you were to script that out, you would never know who's going to win that game. There's wide open threes, there's people missing shots and getting turnovers and blocking shots. It was kind of just a wild sequence to finish off what was like a really good playoff sequence or playoff weekend. But yeah, kind of going back to what you're saying, I think it's hard to say because if you were to ever look at these teams going into the season, you're thinking, okay, Bivouac has been kind of a underachieving franchise since they've joined the team. And then the other question would be, how has Three's Company not made the playoffs since Mario Chalmers and Michael Beasley have joined the team? And so it's really crazy to think how much of a difference these two teams have made, but also just kind of the personnel changes that they made have taken them so far. With like, if you think about Bivouac, like adding two bigs, I think was huge for them because it's something they haven't had in a while, but two versatile bigs. But also too, like Gerald Green is coming off the bench every game, a guy who's been a 20-point scorer in this league. And then on the flip side, like to Nas's credit, he's come a long way from being at FAMU and to kind of being like a YouTuber, I guess is what some people say from the outside looking in. Like, I don't know if anyone would necessarily expect these two teams to make it the distance or change their franchises around in the way they did. So it's kind of cool, and I feel like it leads for the unexpected.
Yeah. No, and I think that there were some teams that didn't perform the way that we expected. I mean, even Trilogy, like how awful they started the season and then how good they looked at the end of the season. And it's kind of a bummer thinking, well, maybe you guys could have been better. You could have been in the playoffs, and that would have, been a cool team to watch. And then with the triplets as well, they just had some, stuff going on behind the scenes, this and that. Some of their guys really stepped up, but that was a team that I also thought they had so much potential to me in the beginning. They were also like one of my top teams. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's just the little things. And these games, though, like obviously when we get down to the wire, like we are now, like every second counts, every point counts. And so you can't sleep on anything. If you don't want to get, I mean, I even look back at that enemies game, right? And they had like 4 threes that they missed that they could have won it by, right? And some of them like rattled in and out. I think Elijah had one that rattled in and out. And then Jordan ultimately got a shot blocked, which led to their three. But in my mind, I was kind of thinking, okay, after we've missed two, why aren't we going for an easy two?
Right.
Three's Company gets a three, you still have to win by two.
Mm-hmm.
So at least it like would put them in a better situation. So I was like a little bit confused because enemies were up even more, and then that allowed Three's Company to like get back in whatever. But that's just the nature of Big Three.
Yeah, I
How
guess go
those
big or
games
go
end when you're
home.
ending on when you're ending on like a point, whatever it's called, you know what I mean? It's not like a time, it's hitting a certain number of points.
Yeah.
So
I think it'll make for a really interesting championship game. Even thinking about the fact that the first game ended in such a kind of a sour way that it did, with the technicality, and we didn't have any timeouts, but we didn't call a timeout. What do you
yeah.
remember most from like the week 2 matchup and kind of that whole scenario going down? Obviously
You mean
outside,
with Three's Company?
yeah, just with Three's Company. I mean, outside of them being bombed and disappointed and arguing their case, like, is there anything that like you remember that maybe like stood out from that week 2 matchup that makes you think like maybe this is revenge season right now for Three's Company?
I mean, Three's Company just has the momentum because even Scal was talking to me before the enemies Three's Company game, and he was like, "Who do you think?" And I said, "But I think Three's Company like has the momentum. Like whatever they're doing right now, it seems to be carrying over week to week, and so maybe it was that week 2 is just set them on fire, which they're already a fiery team, so I kind of wouldn't want to add any fuel to that
Yeah.
because that's what they thrive off of. All of them do. Like Beasley thrives off of that. Chalmers thrives off. Like they're not going to back down to anyone. We've talked about Reggie Evans. Like those guys are not backing down to anyone. So I think it's gonna probably come down to just composure and defensive stops and just not making dumb mistakes either, not getting in foul trouble, not calling a timeout when you don't have one, not bringing the fire when you can't, little things like that that end up changing the momentum in a
Sure.
game.
Do you have a prediction on who you think will win? Are you still deciding up until Sunday?
Oh, that's tough to say. It's such a good matchup, honestly. It's such a good
It really
matchup.
is probably the
It
best one we
would,
could have got.
yeah. And I think also Gary Payton is a great coach.
He's a great coach.
And and the thing about that too was the guys really listen to him. Like when they're in the huddle, they listen to him and they make adjustments based on what he says. Like he does not have a problem getting his guys' attention, getting them to like focus and getting them centered, which I think is, I mean, that's hard to do if you're coaching any professional league with men. They're all like full of egos. These are all pros. It's hard. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just the nature of the beast, but they do really respect him and listen to him. And he's able to get his guys composed, which I think has just been so like helpful for them. When stuff starts going crazy or people are chatting or whatever, he's able to center them and then he can go off and chat to the other team,
Yeah.
and mouth off to them.
Chat.
That was like so
Yeah.
epic that one week. Yeah.
Chat. Yeah, just
I
a
don't
friendly
know. It's
conversation.
hard. Yeah, it's hard for me to make a prediction. I do think like it's really fun for me because I think Brewer and Beasley are our two standout MVPs. Like
Mm-hmm.
they should be the two guys that we're talking about. And I think Brewer because he plays so well on both sides of the court. Like his defense is
Insane.
unrivaled in this
Mm-hmm.
league. But Beasley, on the other hand, like I've said before, can literally score on anyone. So I feel like those two guys leading their teams is just really exciting. So we'll have to see. I don't
Yeah,
know.
we'll just let it play out. How about
It's a
that?
good matchup. I
Yeah.
hope we get a good game like
Yeah.
last week or like the week 2 game because yeah,
That's what we
the
need.
fans deserve it. We deserve it. Yeah.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
gonna be good.
Within that, we're also going to get, like you said, the celebrity game, as we alluded to earlier, but also the All-Star game too. And I always find that very fun because it's, obviously the best of the best who had great seasons, getting a chance to compete against one another. Within that, though, the hope is always to see some bring the fire situations, some different guys go one-on-one.
hmm
I know I didn't preface this earlier, but if there's two guys you could see in that scenario, it doesn't even have to be in the big 3, but two guys you could see in that scenario, is there anyone that like has come to mind, or have you been watching from like the sidelines and been thinking like it'd be cool to see X and Y like match up against each other if they had the opportunity.
I mean, we just said it. Brewer and Beasley would be great in that
Yeah.
championship game, you know. But other all-stars, who do I like?
Or even anyone.
Let's see,
it can be someone who hasn't
like
played.
Briscoe and Isaiah Stewart or Jordan Crawford, because Briscoe also can score on anyone.
Yeah, he's been
I
pretty
think
dominant.
honestly, Crawford and Elijah Stewart, they talk so much. So seeing them match up against anyone is just always fun in that situation. We didn't see much with. There was one instance with Jeff Teague and somebody, but
Oh yeah.
obviously Jeff Teague being like, I forget what week that was.
It might have been against
But
Brewer.
Jeff Teague, was it? Because didn't Brewer say I like my matchup or something
Yeah,
when
or
he was
it might have been
talking
the week
about
that he
that?
was
Because
talking
he's,
about too small or something. They were kind of going
yeah,
back and
yeah,
forth.
yeah. He does that quite a bit. But I think like Jeff Teague, obviously like being a former NBA guy and not a lot of people getting to see him kind of in that one-on-one scenario, I think that's fun. It's sometimes fun when the bigs go at it too, because normally they're the ones who are about to fight one another during the game. Like,
That's a good point.
um, so Isaiah Austin also versus anyone. I mean, that whole enemies team, they just talk so much. Jeremy Pargo, I love his matchup against anyone because he can score anywhere on the court.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of them. I'd need to see like the all-star list in front of me, but I feel like we should have we should allow more bring the fires for the all-star game. Do you know if they do that? They should be like unlimited bring the fire
Unlimited
for the
bring the
all-star game.
fires.
Literally do it.
Just
It would
every
be so
foul
much
call.
fun.
Yeah.
Can we? Does
I
anyone have
mean,
Cube's
I was
number?
gonna
Can
say,
I just tweet at him?
yeah, just tweet at him. Maybe somebody can make that happen because that would be
Yeah, literally.
such a funny scenario. I don't know if that game would ever end. Guys would just be going back and forth nonstop.
Who cares? It would be so
We'll just put a
good.
time limit
Like,
on it. Yeah, who cares?
yeah, we should.
That'd be
That would
so
be so
fun.
much fun.
Um,
Um, okay, so definitely putting that out there. I will talk to who we need to speak to, and if the rule changes, you can thank me. The rad
got it.
rule.
Yeah, the rad rule. Every All Star will have unlimited bring the fire challenges. I love it.
Unlimited,
Last
for
thing, I just
sure.
want your quick thoughts on this. Obviously, there's been a lot of conversations about the Olympics with them just wrapping up and the 3-on-3 gold medalists from Netherlands playing against the Big Three and how they've
Hmm.
accepted, but FIBA has blocked that scenario. What do you kind of make of it, all of it, kind of being in your first year in the Big Three and then also the Olympics coinciding with it, and just like what do you make of it in general?
Yeah, I mean, I interviewed Q about it both weeks in San Antonio and in Nashville just for those updates. I actually saw the official letter also that FIBA sent to the Netherlands team, basically saying why they weren't allowing them to play. I get it in a sense. I don't, they basically said that the request wasn't put in within enough time. They basically made the request within 10 days, but we also didn't know the gold medal winning team
Right.
until they had that gold medal winning game. And so that's not 3 weeks before our, weekend in Boston. So basically they said because it wasn't within the 3 week notice that FIBA would need for this Netherlands team to play against ours. That's why they were outright denying it. I don't know even if it was, requested to them 3 months in advance if FIBA would have let them. I think for FIBA and for any of those teams that were in the Olympics, it would be a bad look for them to lose to one of our big three teams.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think there's a good chance they would. I think that we have some of the best 3-on-3 players in the world. I don't know all the politics around why our guys wouldn't be able to play for the USA 3-on-3 team. I know that I think it was like, was it Brian Windhurst or someone on ESPN talked about what you need to do to even get to the audition or the tryout for that
Mm-hmm.
Team
Yeah.
USA 3-on-3 team. And I think it's like a tough process. But I think in general, kind of my takeaway from all of it, and I've been saying this from the beginning, Big Three would thrive doing something overseas. There are so many basketball fans around the world and in so many different countries aside from US fans where I think that we could sell out arenas 4 nights in a row in another country if we brought the big three to somewhere like China or Japan or France or Spain or the Philippines or Brazil. There are fans, and we've also witnessed that through our X broadcast. We've seen people tuning in from all over the world. And so I think that there is an international play with the big three. I don't know like how all of this works out, but I'm hoping that we could get over to somewhere and at least have an exhibition game, play against some of those guys. I'm bummed for the Netherlands players because 250K is a lot to leave on the table,
For sure. For sure.
And I think like for that alone, like whether they won or whether we won, I think it would just be a great competition regardless. And FIBA rules are also different. So I think that there's that as well. We'd have to figure out what is the most fair. But I'm bummed that it's not happening. I think it would have been highly viewed. I think it would have been great exposure for the Netherlands team and the States, like on US soil. They probably wanted that exposure as well, plus a chance at 250K. But maybe now that we know, we can set up something more for next season, whether it's, and Cube even said that, like anywhere, anytime, we'll play anybody, basically. He's confident in the guys that we have. And I think I'm with him on that. But
yeah. I couldn't have said it better. I think the international presence definitely should happen at some point. We've had FIBA players, gold medalists in our league as well, and we've kind of see how that's turned out. So who knows? Maybe those guys from Olympic teams or the Netherlands will maybe try to join the big three. We'll have an international presence once again, but ultimately I think it is a missed opportunity, but hopefully one that eventually can come through. But Rachel, I know that you're limited on time, so I just want to say thank you and congrats on kind of ending your first season in a bang. You've done a phenomenal job this year, and I think it'll be exciting to see how the matchups play out in Boston, and excited to continue the journey. So thanks for your time, and best of luck with everything that goes on in Boston.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I will see you there.
Yeah, for
Hope
sure.
we get a good game, but I think we will. It's going to be fun.
No doubt. Thanks again.
Cool. Thank you.